Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. This morning we're going to be led by Ceil Sharman. She's one of the people in our congregation who's been trained as a spiritual director. Ceil, we spoke recently of my interview with Dr. Jeff Nagel, who's the Director of Behavioral Health for Orange County, and his recommendation for mindfulness. Would you briefly review what your takeaway from that?
Yes, he mentioned mindfulness as a way to relax. And he suggested that breathing deeply is a way to focus and to begin relaxing, and then scanning our bodies to find areas of tension. It's a way to flatten the emotional curve and very helpful in these times of sheltering. And then I guided you in practicing imagination prayer, which is a form of being very present to the scriptures, a form of mindfulness.
Could you remind us of how that process of imaginative prayer goes?
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like watching a movie where you see what the characters are doing and saying and feeling, and sometimes you even get so involved in the movie that you feel the tears or the laughter or hanging from the rafters. You are in the scene. You use your 5 senses as you're progressing, and you imagine that you are one of the characters. But don't worry, because your part is silent.
So, Ceil, if this is new for some of us, what do you suggest? Do you have any suggestions or cautions for us about how to do that?
This is a form of prayer that appeals to some people and is very difficult for others. I happen to love story, and so it's one that I particularly like. But we'll be offering other forms, and they may be ones that you would like. But in any of these forms of contemplative prayer, you want to not worry if you feel distracted by anything. Sometimes your distractions are even the Holy Spirit guiding you in a new direction, and that's okay. And also don't worry if you don't get it right, like you think you always should. There is no right or wrong in this. We're going to be using our imaginations, and that's a part of who we are, a part of the wonderfully made person that God made us to be. Today I'm going to guide you through Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 to 21, where Jesus feeds the 5,000.
So we aren't going to be able to pause for very long on the video. And if anybody wants to have more time for silence, they can hit pause and they'll get a little more time.
Sounds good.
Let's get started.
Okay. We'll also have some references listed on the website and on the video that will help you if you'd like to continue this process.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Let's begin again by relaxing our bodies. Taking those deep, cleansing breaths, the kind that go all the way down into your abdomen, and then exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathing in deeply through your nose and exhaling slowly through your mouth. Continue for several breaths, breathing deeply and slowly. As you continue to breathe deeply and slowly, scan your body looking for areas of tension. Many of us carry tension in our shoulders or our neck or our abdomen or our head. Notice where you feel areas of tension. As you continue to breathe deeply and slowly, travel your breath into those areas of tension and just feel your body relax as you do so. Continuing to breathe deeply and slowly into those areas of tension. And I invite you now to say a silent prayer to God, inviting your Holy Spirit, His Holy Spirit, into this time with you. You can continue to breathe deeply and slowly as you invite God's presence into this time with you. Listen as I read to you where Jesus feeds the multitude. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. He saw a great crowd, and Jesus had compassion on them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the village and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed them and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Reflect for a moment on the story that you've just heard about the feeding of the multitudes. And now I invite you to put yourself in this scene. You can be looking at the scenery, the people walking, Jesus off in the distance, what does the land look like? What's the weather like? What sounds do you hear while the crowd walks and perhaps talks? Are there any fragrances, any plants nearby? Feel the texture of the garments people are wearing. Are they smooth or rough? What colors do you see? And now I invite you to put yourself in the scene. You can become whichever character you feel led to. Perhaps one of the gentlemen, or a woman, or a child, or even Jesus off in the distance. Notice again how you're dressed, what your surroundings are. How are you feeling? Jesus, we know, was tired, but looked at the crowd with compassion, so stayed with them. As you're walking along, look at your feet, your sandals. Are they dusty? How does it feel as you put one step in front of another? You catch up to Jesus, and he looks at you with love and compassion. Either be Jesus or see him gaze at you with love and compassion. Jesus begins to heal your sick. Perhaps you're someone who brings someone up to Jesus for healing. You explain to Jesus the problem. What needs healing? Is it emotional or physical? Or again, if you're Jesus, you're looking with compassion as others are brought to you. Maybe you're in the back of the crowd and hesitant to go forward, but you work up your courage and ask Jesus to heal you. Many of you go forward. Jesus heals you and gives you peace. Continue as you watch this process of the crowd meeting Jesus' compassion and love. Now, perhaps you chose to be one of the disciples who've been hustling around, trying to protect Jesus, worried about his fatigue and the lack of food for the people. Maybe it's you that comes to Jesus and says, "Send the people away to the village. It's time for their food, and we have nothing to offer them." How does it feel for that disciple, if it's you or if you overhear the conversation? to know that you're being sent away to the village to find food and leave this place. Perhaps you are the disciple that tells Jesus, we don't have anything to give them. We have 5 loaves and 2 fish, and that's not enough for this whole crowd. See or be that disciple. Perhaps he's holding up the fish and you detect the aroma. See the bread. Imagine, how could that possibly feed this crowd? So Jesus responds, bring the fish and the bread to me. See them go among the crowd and collect the food and bring it to Jesus. See or be Jesus as he blesses the small portion of food, breaks it, and gives it to the disciples. Hold your hands out to receive it, and then pass it around among the crowd. Are you passing it out or receiving it? How do you feel as you continue to see ample food being distributed? Everyone eats to their satisfaction. The disciples are satisfied. The crowd is fed. And Jesus has worked his miracle. See or be the disciples as they gather up the leftovers. See the multitudes as they look to Jesus in amazement and in gratitude. And now gather together the main strands of this time. Pay attention to the parts that most deeply moved you. Or perhaps be aware of the parts that disturbed you. You can return to any of this at another time. Finally, speak to God about this experience. Tell him your feelings, your thoughts, any memories that arose, any concerns. Carry on a conversation with God. You'll probably want to pause to extend this, but be present to God and hear what he has to say, being sure to listen as a part of the conversation. And when you're done, you may wish to say a prayer of thanks, or perhaps the Lord's Prayer.
Thank you, Ceil.
You're
I've never
welcome.
before quite looked at the passage that way or experienced myself either giving or passing out the bread. I like that a lot.
Good.
Yeah, it's a great way to pray.
Glad.
Yeah. So you have some references about how to do this and some things about imaginative prayer. And we're going to post those at the end of this video and also on our website so people can check those out
Good.
if they want to do that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.